All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you again for joining another Pro Huddle. This one is just going to be me, another hour of me talking, but I'm hoping that it'll be helpful to y'all. So, again, just me. I'll go through our updates. I'm going to give you some general updates on what we've added for the CPA inquiry intake form. And we have two topics. The key topic is what to consider when working on an RFP. Then we've got our review topic where I'm just going to touch on the fiscal year 26 year-end dates, where we're at. And then the knowledge nugget is talking about the CPA assistance and some general observation and feedback that I have from my perspective and what I'm going to ask of y'all. So jumping into it, there's nothing new that's been completed other than just the updates to the CPA inquiry form. So last month, the completion was the CPA inquiry form in general. Now we're just making improvements and adding additional stuff to it. So nothing else has been completed. We have all of our ongoing stuff in the background that's going on. I can say on the threshold change, we're further than we were last time on a final round of review, and I believe that should be getting wrapped up and packaged relatively soon to go over to council. So we're getting closer on that. But otherwise, we just have a lot of projects going on and dumpster fires to put out as they come up. So jumping into the CPA inquiry form updates. So one thing that you will see is we have an active search and activity page now. So you can use that page to find and track your department's inquiry. So when you're in there, you'll only see anything that your department submitted, but you can go to it and it's a search and activity here where you're able to choose what it is you need to look for, the way you see it, etc. There's an update section that has been added up at the top of the individual items. So like if you chose one of the items you submitted, it's a read-only concept where you'll see the updates from CPAs on the inquiries that you've submitted. So if they have any notes or updates for you as like the status or whatever, we do have an update tab in there for you now. And then we have activated the canceling option for the CPA inquiry. And so this is similar to how you use ProDirect in other circumstances where it allows you to cancel, or you can make adjustments, so to speak, before we open it. So the option will be there for you to cancel as long as the CPA hasn't opened it up. Once it's open and in that triage state, then you won't be able to cancel it. But you can still ask us if you're just like, hey, I don't need this anymore. You can ask us via email. And eventually, once the chat function becomes available, you can request it via that. But we just wanted to note that the cancel request, if you're determining that you no longer need that assistance, as long as it hasn't been opened yet, you have that ability. There's a cancel request button at the end of the item, and this is the verification pop-up that you'll get where you can choose to cancel or say you didn't mean to. All right, so those are the general CPA inquiry form updates. Now, jumping into our key topic, what to consider when working on an RFP. In the next slide, I'll get into why I thought of this as a topic, but where are we right now with RFPs and the status of them, what they look like, how they're going, etc. So I want to say I do see a lot of movement with RFPs, and when I say movement, there's just a lot of them going on. Things have been really busy, so I know there are plenty of departments out there that are trying to crank through some of their stuff. We're getting away from the extensions beyond term that we kept seeing in CRC, so that in and of itself, thank you. Our goal is to get these things out in a competitive process in a normal, timely fashion and in normal cycles. So thank you. There's a lot of movement with RFPs, and everybody's cranking away at them. One thing I'll point out is RFP timelines have been improved over the past couple of years, and that's both from our side and department side. I think I've mentioned this not long ago, but our timeline went from being 12 to 13 months of getting an RFP turned around from submission to our office to a executed contract, and we're hitting around 8.5 months right now. So while the Office of Procurement owns that timeline, there is a portion of it, obviously, that lands in the department's court, and that's during the review of the proposals, evaluations, interviews, etc. So, I'm not under any circumstances going to own that whole decrease in time. Like y'all have, the process is becoming more efficient. We're learning from things. We're making adjustments. So in total, we've all contributed to that improvement over the past couple of years of that turnaround time. So thank you for that. Improvement is being made with the RFP quality of things, and that's in regards to the way people are setting them up, what's being considered. I do encourage you to utilize the CPAs for continued assistance. There have been some departments that have really leaned heavily on that, and that's great. Like that's part of the things that I want y'all to do, to use the CPAs. But we're here, utilize them. They're another set of eyes from a different perspective. So we can just keep increasing that quality of what we're building out, how we're presenting things to vendors, and where we ultimately end up with successful contracts. And then we want to help eliminate some self-inflicted obstacles that seem to cause some delay in the RFP process. And when I say that, this is kind of where we're going to be going with this conversation. There are things that we see as patterns or consistent issues that may come up that honestly are often self-inflicted. Yeah, there are times that it's like, oh, we had no idea something was going to happen, or that it would turn out that way, or that we totally missed this piece, right? But there are times that it's like we could have done a better job. We could have been more clear in the information we provided. It's led to a lot of cancellations and resolicitations, and that is literally doubling your effort to get these things taken care of. So, our goal is to help eliminate some of those obstacles we create for ourselves, whether it's building out better scopes, building in clearer performance measures, making sure that we start from the get-go of having the right people on the QSC, all of that. So that's where I'm going to get into with this conversation, is some of the things to consider and really keep in the back of your mind when you're approaching the RFP development. All right, so one thing I want to touch on is what the perspectives are that people need to take into consideration from the vendor and procurement and the department. And this is where what kind of triggered me into doing this topic. So we have our monthly open houses with the vendors, and we have set topics for different months. Some are just generic question and answers, but some of them are, like the recent one we did for February was actually what to consider when responding to an RFP. And so I got to thinking about the fact that the guidance we're giving them, a lot of people are like, we don't know what you want. And honestly, the majority of what I'm telling them in that guidance during those types of open house sessions, because this isn't the first time we've taught that. We usually do this one at least twice a year. And then we do one about responding to IFBs and stuff like that. But one of the biggest things that I tell them is you need to follow exactly what's in that RFP. That's what's going to give you your most success in the proposal you're responding. Don't do what you think they want. Do what the RFP says. Do what the departments have told you to do. If they say submit X, Y, and Z, submit X, Y, and Z. Do a really good version of it, but just make sure you at least submit X, Y, and Z. If they say they want this scope, cover that scope in what your experience is. If they say they want X number of years of experience, make sure you address that. They want a cover letter, do a cover letter. Look at the evaluation criteria. Make sure that you're seeing what evaluation points are the highest, because then that gives you insight into what the department's looking for. So those are the types of things that I'm telling them. And it made me realize I need to touch base with y'all, because this is all based off my experience, what I'm seeing, kind of what I'm observing on the back end of things. But I need to touch base with y'all on what I need y'all to think about, because if I'm telling them, pay attention to what they're saying in the RFP, I need y'all to pay attention to what we're doing in the RFP and how we're building it, what we're thinking through, and the way we're putting that information out there and providing clarity. So that's what guidance has been given to the vendors. It's stuff that has been discussed in open houses. It just led me to, I need to move forward with the conversation with y'all. So then from procurement's perspective, when we're dealing with an RFP, we're predominantly looking at it from how it meets county policy, procedures, and regulations, right? Like that is our primary thing. We're facilitating you getting your need met through a procurement process, and we need to make sure that we cross our T's and dot our I's from that perspective. However, I have encouraged, and we have started asking some logical questions and probing for some more information when it seems obvious to us if there are gaps or inconsistencies, if there's contradiction, if there's, you need to have it by you need to have it submitted timely. Well, we might ask, what is timely? Because being a little more clear to them on what timely means could eliminate some confusion or unknowns. So we are going to be asking questions. This is where I get into the department and what are your needs. So you're the subject matter experts. I accept that. We all accept that. We hope you accept that. We have no intent of crossing a line, getting into your operations, questioning what you're doing, how you're doing it from a technical perspective. It's just that if we look at things and have questions, there's a possibility vendors may look at things and have questions. So if you come back and we ask a general question of what's timely in your world for this service, and you give us an answer, we're assuming as the subject matter experts that if you say, oh, that report should be given in 2 weeks, then you put that in your RFP of with a report being provided in 2 weeks, and the vendor should, if it's everybody's on the same page with the industry, the service, whatever, they should understand that, right? So y'all are subject matter experts. We are looking at from policy, procedure, etc. We will ask questions, but whatever y'all come up with as your answer, we interpret that as your perspective and expertise to make sure that the solicitations that we're putting together are quality and truly clear and associated to what your needs are. So what I'll also say is, if you're in doubt, if you're kind of at I really don't know what I need to ask for, where to start, whatever, okay, that's fine. Don't swallow your pride and say, I need to ask the right questions with the right party so we can make sure we're all on the right foot. So pull all the parties in, your internal participants, OCA, our office, whatever. Bring the right people together in the room at the front end. Brainstorm, discuss it, and let's develop a strategy. What procurement method you use, what it is you need to focus on, what your specific needs are, and to what extent do we need to go into certain detail on performance measures, etc. So these are the different perspectives that I want to make sure everybody understands when we need to consider how we're moving forward with RFPs. Now, this gets into some of the things I want y'all to keep in the back of your mind when you're creating your RFPs, because it's some of the stuff that, going back to the, self-inflicted obstacles and issues that we see as kind of patterns. These are just some of the things we want to point out and have on your radar to consider moving forward, right? Some of y'all hit these things and it's not a big deal. Some of them we realize after the fact and we got to go back and correct it. Some of y'all, honestly, there have been people who are like, I really have no idea where to start on this. It's a new program. We've never done this before, so we're not sure, so we may be able to give you some guidance, some tips on how to approach it, or we may tell you to do an ROI instead of an RFP. All those types of things are things we'll discuss. But here are some common RFP pitfalls that could potentially undermine the success of the RFPs y'all are working so hard on, because I do understand it's a true effort. It's a huge effort from y'all's end. It's a huge effort from our end, and it's a lot of time that goes into it. So if y'all can just keep these in mind, hopefully we can keep improving the quality and where we get with those contracts. All right. One problem, scope that's too vague or potentially too prescriptive, right? You want to define the problem and set those outcomes that are expected, but also there needs to be a little wiggle room. This is one of those things that there is no right or wrong. You need to just find a happy medium balance. If you're too vague, then you're leaving a lot up to the vendors to assume, right? If you don't clearly identify what you want, like what that outcome is expected to be, then they're doing a lot of assumption and kind of crossing their fingers like, hope I'm responding to this right. But then it also leads to, with all of the vendors kind of doing a lot of assumptions, you may get a lot of proposals that are all sorts of different directions. And now it's really hard to compare an apples to apples comparison when you're going through your evaluation, because you may not have provided enough clarity in order to help them hone in on what it is you want to hear back from them about. Describing how the work must be done versus the outcomes that are expected. We have to be very careful of that. Like, one of the things with how we set contracts up and everything should not be, I expect you to do it this way. Like, there's that concept of the means and methods to how things are done. Yes, certain circumstances may require that if there are certain laws, codes, blah, 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 etc. But we have to be careful not locking ourselves into, it's because I want it done that way. Maybe you need to have that little bit of wiggle room that allows them to be creative or innovative, and that can present to you a little bit of a different approach than maybe what you thought. So if you tell them what your outcomes are, then they can do a little bit more creativity in their response as to how they would approach it and what it is that they could do for you in a way that maybe you didn't think about before. And then too vague, going on the scope gaps, missing information, volume, geography, service hours, performance expectations, all of that. When there's not clarity and there are a lot of unknowns or assumptions that need to be made, they may be like, this is too risky for me to assume that this is what they want, because once they invest their time in these proposals, they want to be able to actually move forward with something. And if they're seeing that it's not clear and there's just a lot of assumptions they need to make, they may be like, all right, I'm not touching this because it's not clear. Maybe the department's like the county's not clear, whatever the case may be, and they're like, not worth my time. So you may lose good vendors just because we weren't clear enough on what we were setting as expectations. All right, minimum qualifications that are too restrictive or too loose. A test that you can do is you can look at your RFP and say, all right, based off what I built out, is it strong enough yet not restrictive enough to get at least 3 qualified vendors to be able to submit something successfully? And if not, then you need to revisit it. And so something to consider is, on the minimum qualifications, really think about what's necessary. Don't do something really extreme because you kind of have your eyes on, who you want or who the players are. And so, if you do restrictive stuff like 10 years of experience in Montgomery County, and the past 2 contracts have been 5-year 5-year contracts and held by one incumbent, you're kind of getting restricted, right? Like it's kind of weeding out anybody else that could be there, and you're limiting that, right? So you need to think of what is truly necessary as a requirement for that work. And all different types of services, goods, etc., vary drastically. If it's somebody doing lawn work, you probably don't need as many years of experience, and it probably doesn't have to be Montgomery County experience, right? But if you're doing something that is tied to a specific Montgomery County program with very intricate details associated to it, and you really need them to understand, health and human services, the way it's built out in Montgomery County, whatever. And I'm using them as an example because there are a lot of vendors tied into health and human services. So you got a broader group, right? So take into consideration your specific circumstances, but be honest and fair about the requirements you put in there. Common over restrictions, the experience threshold, contract value requirements that maybe some people can't meet, and then certifications that may not really be necessary, but you're like, I'd prefer to have this because then I know this vendor may not be available. Listen, I know that's worry by some people of, in one of my future slides, we'll kind of touch on this more, so I'll just stop there. Too loose qualifications create the opposite effect, right? If you don't have years of experience in there, then okay, a vendor that literally just started a business 5 months ago may come in and they can show, I've done projects over the past 5 months that meet this criteria, and you're gonna have to go with that, right? So if you don't have anything to set an expectation, then you could potentially put yourself on the other end of it of, you accept what you get, right? Like you put that type, you didn't put the type of information you wanted to see in there, so therefore you got back exactly what you would hope not to have to deal with. So both extremes cost you on that front. Evaluation criteria that doesn't reflect what actually matters. So you should make sure that when you're building your scope and your evaluation criteria, they clearly play off of one another, because you shouldn't have a scope that has all this information in there and then really vague evaluation criteria that's just like cost, experience, and general technical proposal, right? Like, think about it. You have the opportunity to build good evaluation criteria. And then on the opposite side, if you build really good evaluation criteria, but don't give them a whole lot of stuff in the scope, then they're going to be like, okay, you want me to get this technical in it, but you're not telling me what I need to focus on. So consider that, right? When you're building your criteria, what is your scope saying? When you're developing your scope, how detailed are you bringing your criteria to match that? You don't want to mislead vendors in their efforts to build a proposal that they want to provide you something legit and successful. But again, if we don't have the right view of these things, then it just causes more problems for them, and then you may not get successful proposals back. Misaligned weighting. Weighting of the evaluation criteria undermines the evaluation before it starts. So if you weight your pricing at 60% for something that's a super complex professional service, like, I don't know, this gets into the IT world, or something that is very intricate, you need somebody who really truly has the technical background and understanding. If you do 60% at cost and then fill in all the other pieces with smaller gaps, and technical is really important, do realize you're not weighting it based off the factor that really matters and getting the best fit for the service you're trying to meet. So take that into consideration, right? RFPs, their best value, their best, take into consideration cost and quality. That doesn't mean you can't have a higher pricing evaluation. That's fine. What we're saying is just take it into consideration. Make sure you're asking legitimate, how does this fall in what our expectations are? Are we covering what truly matters to us? And then when you put stuff like demonstrated experience without like pointers of what that type of demonstration of experience is, it can lead to very inconsistent responses. It could lead to protest exposure because things weren't clear, or demonstrated experience. Again, this kind of falls into the incumbents may have a leg up on new vendors, and if we present it in certain ways, then it could seem skewed towards them, etc. So we want to be clear on, when you say demonstrated experience, what type of experience. And again, it's all associated to your circumstances. Y'all are subject matter experts. You should be able to hone in on the things that matter. Poorly structured evaluation process. So long as we do a legit, credible process, it helps with the competitions, and the vendors tend to remember how all of that gets handled, and could lead to potentially some of them not responding later. Or if it's all like, if we're good, we do debriefings and it's helpful to them, and maybe they can be successful in another one. But we just need to make, from our end, when we're going through the evaluation process, that our scoring methodology and weights are clearly communicated in the RFP. That goes back to the last slide. So that they can really focus on what it is you want, as opposed to making those assumptions. QSC, this is something that it is a key one, right? Because something that I've seen is a lot of either delayed thoughts towards the QSC, therefore forcing just I'm going to pick, we just pick this person, this person, this person, and not a lot of thought was put into what type of technical expertise those people may have, what do they bring to the table on being able to evaluate the things that you have thoroughly built out in your RFP, etc. So making sure you give yourself time to do that analysis. Who would serve best on this QSC? Making sure they have the qualifications for technical review, because the other thing that we see is that after the fact, like, this has happened on a lot of occasions actually, and it's somewhat surprising. A lot of times people are like, our QSC members don't know how to review this from a technical perspective. Okay, we should have probably had somebody who knew the technical perspective on the QSC. That's kind of how you build out a QSC, is subject matter experts that are able to clearly identify and be able to know the language that is being discussed in the RFP and the proposals. And the other thing is the QSC members not being given direction on the expectations of the evaluation criteria, right? So just as we're telling you, make sure it's clear for the vendors. If the QSC members, because I'm aware that this is how it is, QSC members are not the ones working on the solicitation. So if you've worked on the solicitation, you've worked with the program people to make sure we got everything covered, somebody needs to make sure that it's clearly identified to the QSC members. This is how we built it out. This is why we built it out this way. These are the things that were important to us and how we considered it. They should be able to speak that language if you have the right people on there, but give them direction as to how it was built out, why it was built out that way. That will give them an opportunity to be more in tune with what it is they need to do during their evaluations, and what the broader group of people who are involved in the solicitation are expecting. If you don't have this type of stuff in the front of your mind about the QSC, this is definitely something that can undermine that successful RFP, because it may not be going in the direction, like, it's in their hands, right? Like, once it's out there, the QSC is the group that's working on this, so it is in their hands. Unrealistic evaluation timelines, not accounting for proposal volume, scoring complexity, etc. So this just goes into we come up with agreement dates at the front end of our RFP solicitation. Those are, and that's 100% working with the departments, right? Like we have a general schedule that we think it can be met in. However, if it's a more complex solicitation, then maybe it needs to be posted for longer. Or if you've had experience in the past where you've received 40 proposals to something, that's a lot of proposals to review. So maybe we can't expect a realistic timeline to be 1 month of proposal review. So let's all be honest with ourselves from the get-go. What is realistic timelines for the posting, the evaluation timeline to review the proposals and get through interviews? It's one thing if you have something where you're just reviewing written proposals, but if it's written and then interviews, like keep all of that take all of that into consideration. And build that in, because you don't want people to just be rushing through it because now everybody's running across a deadline of, oh, okay, that next date is coming up, or, oh, the contract that we have now is expiring in a month. Hurry up and get this done. Like, be timely about it. Take all that into consideration. So, requirements written to preserve how things have always been. When you are recompeting existing program contracts, you really need to rethink. Like, we don't want to stay stuck in what is likely a minimum of 5 years ago, right? Our contracts are 1 + 2 years. You take into consideration that another contract was in place for a couple of years while you were building this out. Like, when you're working on new RFPs, you're talking the last time we did this was probably 5 years ago. So make sure y'all are doing your due diligence to kind of do that flip of the switch reset and look at what the markets are doing now. Look at what other jurisdictions are doing now. What is it in that program, that operations, whatever? Let's make sure we're all up to speed on how things typically go. So not staying to the status quo requirements. Sorry. And that means not necessarily just taking the old solicitation, dropping it in the new boilerplate and saying, we're good to go. No, you need to, doesn't mean you can't start from there, right? Doesn't mean you're completely reinventing the wheel. But if you do that, look at it and say, okay, from this last solicitation, how is our contract currently going? Where we run into problems? What can we improve? What has changed in our needs? What has changed in the cool things we want to see happen in the future? Take all of that into consideration. Don't just default to how things have been. Let's keep it that way and move forward. And signs to look out for: experience tied to proprietary systems. So this is one of the things that kind of goes down the incumbent issue, where if we are just putting language in there of how things are done now, things that are done now may be tied to proprietary systems, and we have to look beyond that. It's what are the outcomes you want, not how is it done. That'll keep us away from incumbent essentially being built into this, right? Contract thresholds that only the incumbent satisfies, because if you do that, then you're not considering the other things that may be possible that other new vendors can bring to the table. Scope that describes the current vendor's service model. Again, that kind of goes back to the how is it done now. If you get stuck on that, then there may be a vendor, and especially in this day and age, y'all, everything's improving at warp speed. So you don't want to, let's just do it how we did it before because everything's working, and completely rule out what can we do better? Where can we, what things have we not even thought of that other vendors can bring to the table? And then a big one is if competitors perceive a solicitation kind of as a predetermined or stagnant, leading to the incumbent is what everyone's comfortable with, there's a couple of things that might happen. They either may submit just proposals. They may not respond at all, so you lose an opportunity of potentially seeing something new. or we open ourselves to potential protest situation if it seems as though it is skewed towards the incumbent. As a result, you lose your pricing pressure, your innovation, and accountability, and a lot of time. Because if those types of situations come up and we have to resolicit, that's not in anybody's favor. All right, ambiguous or contradictory language. This is where I'll say a CPA can help, because it's a person from a completely different perspective, and you don't necessarily have to submit your stuff to the office as a complete submission yet. They can jump in, they can run their eyes over it and give you general feedback from a plain language perspective. What is in this RFP, does it make sense? Can I, as a general person, understand it? Or do I see two different things, say referencing two different dates or turnaround times for reports or whatever? So ambiguous language, it doesn't get resolved by the vendors. It gets worked around. They figure out, oh, well, they said this here and this here. All right, that's fine. We'll use that to our advantage, set up our proposal this way, and then the county kind of gets stuck. So they'll resolve their things in the way they need to do it. They may not ask the questions for y'all to be able to clarify it, and then that'll make your review of the proposals difficult or potentially set us up for issues moving forward. Contradictions between sections, again, that's just it says one thing here, another thing here. If they don't ask the questions, maybe they don't catch it, and then you run into an issue in the long run, like long term, down after you've gotten the contract, and everybody's like, crap, which one do we follow? That's just, again, a general quick review of somebody who may not be intimately involved, being able to look through it real quick and be like, oh, caught this one. And every ambiguity is a potential addendum, right? We give the vendors opportunities, whether it be pre-submission conferences or we have it in our boilerplates, submit stuff to us. We ask them to do it in writing. They can submit questions. So the more questions they have, the longer it may be for your RFP to get completed. Because if we're not clear and those questions are the clarifying part of this, then it'll just drag on and drag on. And here's one thing I'm going to point out. A lot of times there's frustration from the department side when our office says you need to extend the due date and time because there are so many outstanding questions or we haven't responded to the questions yet. It's not an argument I want to get into with departments. It's more of just have some common decency of what is fair to both parties. Yes, y'all may be under tight deadlines for whatever the reason may be. Maybe it's grant funds, maybe you waited too long and now the current contract's expiring and that vendor doesn't want to extend, so we're all under the gun, whatever the case may be. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't take into account what is fair to the vendors to give them an opportunity for us to be successful. Give them the answers they need, give them the time they need to figure it out and respond, and then we can be successful in the proposals that they're giving back. All right. I know that's a point of frustration that might come up if we tell y'all we need to extend, but it's not because we just want to say extend it. Like, these aren't things we just do for the fun of it every day. It's because we have to take into consideration what will be in the best interest of the county. And in the best interest of the county, if questions are outstanding and it's 2 days away for a due date and time, then we want to extend it to both give the department an opportunity to adequately respond and provide the clarifications, and the vendor an opportunity to adequately update their proposal in response to those clarifications. That way you get a proposal that is more thorough and clear, right? It's not because we just want to do it for fun. Kind of ties right into this, ignoring the vendor's perspective. Would a qualified vendor understand what's asked, believe the process is fair, and decide it's worth competing for? We are very centered on us, right? Like, how is it for us? But we do need to have that perspective of, okay, but if I was a vendor and I was reading this, does it seem reasonable, logical, clear? Would they actually be able to respond to what it is I want? Or do we just throw something together because we're under a time crunch and just need to get it out, and we're going to cross our fingers that everybody responds the way we want them to? But then we end up in the evaluation process saying none of these make sense, right? So from the get-go, look at it from a vendor's perspective, because if you're building out your RFP based off your needs with the consideration and perspective of a vendor, then you can hit all the points that should make it clear for both sides. So when they're looking at the scope and they're assessing the risk that they're going to take on in response to this, those are the things that you need to consider for them to be able to be comfortable with that risk. Make sure that the payment terms are fair for everyone and that the opportunity is balanced on both sides. Contract terms that are one-sided, difficult to ensure, or legally unreasonable cause vendors to opt out of building significant risk premiums or build significant risk premiums to their pricing. And then payment terms. I mean, obviously, if we have, for the most part, all of our payment terms are pretty straightforward. 30-day turnaround time, all of that. But if anything is thrown in there as something a little different, which is allowed, let's just be reasonable with it, right? And then if there's something that we're saying on invoicing that we're like, you have to do, multiply B times F, which equals this, and then divide that by what, and that's how you have to show your invoicing, not helpful. Stick to the basics, keep it simple. That's what they're going to appreciate and respond to. All right, giving them insufficient time to respond. Kind of already touched on this a couple slides ago, but the timeline should reflect how long it actually takes the vendor to prepare a good proposal. So this is kind of reiterating what I've said, I think, between two different slides before, but make sure you're reasonable from the get-go on the timelines you set. If you oftentimes run into issues, whether it be budget cycles or contract expiration dates, little hint, we know when the budget cycles are. Everybody does. And we also already know when the contracts expire. There's no surprise to anybody on either of those dates. So give yourself enough time to get it done in a organized, functional manner. Not rushed, not last minute. Complex scopes will likely need complex responses, therefore making sure that you give the vendor enough time to build out the team that they need, write up a good proposal, etc. So that goes to an RFP right now needs to be 30 days, but if it's that complex, we may need to do 60 days. What's realistic for that service? And if you try to shorten timelines or keep it smaller when it really should be longer, you potentially miss out on some good new vendors or smaller vendors that can still provide good service, because it's harder for them. Listen, I know that argument is a rough one to sit with, because then it's also like, okay, well, if it's hard for them to do a proposal, then why do I want to mess with them in a contract? But this is where I just say we need to be reasonable, right? What is truly a realistic and fair number? And then late RFP modifications can cause problems. It changes the final, changes that are issued in the final days, going back to the clarity that's provided after questions. They may not have time to actually get that in there. And this last one is asterisks, because it's a difficult one. The main thing I'm going to say when it comes to budget is consideration to include it should be discussed. But at a minimum, whether you put budget information in your solicitation or not, you need to provide some sort of clear pricing structure so that it'll help with comparable evaluations. And I know that's difficult depending upon the service, the industry, etc. And I know that's also difficult because you have to take into consideration that how it's done versus what they can propose. But you, from subject matter expert level, should have a general understanding of how the industry that you're in runs, how things are paid. Just at least some form of basic pricing structure will benefit everybody. For them to respond clearly, for you to go into that evaluation with a clear expectation set, as opposed to just all these wonky things all over the place from different vendors because they just all do it different ways. But the argument for whether or not budget numbers should be included is fair, and it's fair on both sides. So just remember these potential issues. Not including a budget means that they don't know what a competitive number is. They don't know what realistic money is, realistic value is for the county. So they're literally just making huge assumptions. Could they go on Data Montgomery and be like, okay, they have a budget of this every year? Sure, but that doesn't mean for that contract and that service. So it's ambiguous. It leads them to potentially be on higher risk factor, which to the point of vendors may choose not to submit anything due to the lack of clarity on the anticipated budget and perceived risk that could be there. So then on the flip side, potential issue of including the budget. If their normal pricing is lower, they could very well take advantage of that, right? And be like, sweet, I know how much they have, so I'll buff up my prices some, especially on an RFP because it's not based off of cost, right? So yeah, that's an issue. And then the other thing is vendors don't respond at all because the budget presented may actually be unrealistic to the industry market. Maybe our budget is so low and they're like, yeah, you're not getting that. Like, you're telling me you want me to do a whole lot of stuff for a lot, like a very little amount of money. So not responding because that doesn't make sense. I can say that is, these are things to consider. The budget conversation and if it should be included is still kind of a sticky one. So key principles for a stronger RFP: define your outcomes, not your methods. Do your market research. Please do some due diligence. Do that investigation. What are other jurisdictions doing? Is it successful for them? How did they structure their stuff, etc. Align your evaluation criteria to what matters to you. Give vendors fair time and terms, and test your document. Have somebody take a look at that may not be fully entrenched in it, so they can look at it from a very plain, neutral perspective. Bottom line, well-crafted RFP is a foundation of a competitive, fair, and successful procurement. Every pitfall avoided is a stronger proposal received and a better outcome for the public we serve. So keep all of these points and keep them in the back of your mind, take them into consideration. I'm running out of time, so I'll go through this quick. Just another reminder, this memo exists. Our dates are now done through January. April 3rd is the next date for contract amendments and modifications, including renewals. So again, the asterisks of the CPI issues, we know if people ask for CPIs beyond that, we'll work with you. But come April, that's when these dates start ticking off quick. So just pay attention, please. All right, knowledge nugget. I probably don't have as much time that I really want to discuss this, but I'll run through it quickly. This is about the CPA assistants and my observations and feedback that I need from you. My observation is the CPAs, so this is something I'm really passionate about because it comes into play from my entire career, the things I've done at different places I've been, different, pots that I've had my hands in. And it's working, but I am the first person to say all the time when I present something new to y'all that I'm not necessarily going to hit the nail on the head at the beginning. It's not going to be perfect. It will never be perfect, but I can always do stuff to improve it. And this is brand new and it's exciting and I'm passionate about it, but I'm willing to accept when I see that there are bumps in the road, and there are bumps in the road with this. So what my observations have been is it is supportive to y'all. There have been times that we've helped departments on certain things and we get good outcomes from it. So that's awesome. Progress on policy and guidelines has been good because I have people in the background now that we're able to work and think and brainstorm through some of the difficulties we have and then put stuff in place that can clarify that for you. For example, the pre-cure process. We now have that guide out there. It's a tool that's always been there. It has always existed, but very rarely was it ever used. And that comes on two parts. One, just people having, knowing that our office will support you in your efforts, but also having it clear as to what it is that needs to be done and actual templates to use, guides to use, etc. But then there comes the part where I am very aware that there's some confusion as we're working through some more of the difficult issues. And when I say difficult issues, it oftentimes comes down to performance issues, stuff that kind of falls in line with operational decisions. And again, we're trying not to cross a line on operational decisions, but be involved in the conversation so that from our perspective, in the manner in which we move forward with your contracts, that we can make sure we're all on the same page, cross our T's, dot our I's, and make sure we do it in the right manner. This, again, the pre-cure process is an example. We've run into issues on multiple fronts where confusion is caused by sometimes the CA, the contract administrators are reaching out to the CPAs, and there's a little bit of information given there. And then sometimes they're having separate conversations with procurement specialists and a little bit of information given there, and there's still a connection problem. And that's something that I've owned, that I've said, as we work through this, I'm having to figure out who connects when, where, what, how, etc. So I'm realizing that's still a gap. So one, please be patient because I'm acknowledging it. I'm trying to figure out what I can do to make it better. So my ask of you, please provide feedback from your perspective of what is helpful and what is challenging, where you may see gaps, where you're like, this is awesome. If you could do this for us more, that's great. That would help me hone in on beyond what my thought is, right? And right now, as we're building out this stuff and we're getting involved and we're trying to help and make things smoother, there's a bumpy road. It's a learning curve for all of us. Let's just keep everyone in the loop. So you can go the route, if you run across issues, you can go the route of using the CPA inquiry, and the CPAs will have the procurement specialists involved because I'm trying to figure out that better connection point. If there's something you reach out to the procurement specialists about, the procurement specialist will get the CPAs involved. Or you, from the get-go, can just say, all right, here's a problem I have. I know the CPA inquiry form goes straight to the CPAs, and that is where the manual connection point with CPAs and procurement specialists will happen. But if you have something that you're sending to procurement specialists, and again, this is beyond your normal procurement actions. If it's normal procurement actions, a renewal, whatever the case may be, procurement specialist all the way. But if it's the stuff where it's like, well, we're having these issues or we really aren't sure what we should do about this, okay, let's just bring everybody in. Could it be too many people at the table? Maybe. But in an effort to make things more efficient and be able to weed out what should or shouldn't be in certain spots, I'd much rather be all there on the same page at the front end rather than y'all struggling on the back end from information that may come from one place, information may come from another place, and then y'all having to make operational decisions that are kind of like, well, I'm not sure yet. I'll stop there. There's a lot more to my thought process, but we are out of time, so I want to make sure that I give y'all time for any questions. Pro huddles, we're going to touch on liquidations next month, what the concept is, what to do, when to do it, what to consider, etc. Events, our regular online open houses I've mentioned, our vendor connection summit on April 22nd. And then that's it. So I'll stop the slideshow and we can go to questions. And Grace, I think I'm good on taking care of the questions. I just need to pull them up. All right. When will accessible PDF versions of procurement forms like PMMD 177, 65 be available? Accessible as in meeting guidelines to be read by screen readers. Sharonda's not on here. Grace,
yeah. Those two forms are our forms. The 177 is the wage requirements law form, and 65 is the MFD form. Both are for the vendors to fill out. I did check with Sharonda on the side. She said we are working with TEPS right now to get the public-facing forms into PDF, accessible PDF versions right now. The timeline we're aiming at around April of this year to get those ready to go. And then the internal forms will be the next patch that will work with TEPS on.
Okay, cool, thank you. All right, the next and only other question. After the QSC evaluated and awarded the RFP to the vendor, awardee and the department negotiated in good faith and signed the contract. Then one of the proposed vendors discovered a miscalculation in the MFD score. This miscalculation may impact the ranking of the awardee. What's the most appropriate way to address the situation? Is reissuing the RFP the only solution? Because I'm aware of this type of issue that has recently happened, it is all circumstantial. There are a lot of variables to be considered depending upon timing of where we're at, what we've done, how we've done it, etc. That answering that of, yeah, reissuing the RFP is the only solution, I can't say that definitively. If you want to talk about your specific circumstance, that it may be one answer, and then someone else's circumstance, depending upon what happened, when, where we're at in the process, etc., what's been posted, what's been advised to other people, may be a different answer. So it's all circumstantial when we run into issues like that. Happy to discuss it. I think on this specific one, there was a discussion about it. So if not, I'm happy to jump into a meeting. But I think Grace was even involved in the discussion for this one and getting that cleaned up. So unfortunately, I can't say yes or no to that. It depends on the circumstances. All right, so it's 10:58. Those are the only two questions I had. Again, I'd love your feedback on the CPA stuff, how it's been helpful, what type of challenges you've seen. I fully acknowledge that things aren't 100% smooth yet on making sure that everybody's in the loop, but I still stand by. I think that these positions are something that is going to be a huge benefit to us in how we become more efficient, improve our process, have extra set of eyes on things, and assist departments with some of the issues that y'all run across. So please direct feedback. You can text me, you send me a chat, send me an email, call me, whatever the case may be. But otherwise, again, thank you all for coming to another Pro Huddle, and we will see you next month.